Is brush styling bad for your curls? You all know that I love brush styling when I style my hair because it has so many great benefits like enhancing your curl pattern, but is it damaging for the hair and can it actually alter your curl pattern? Let's dive in. If you are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Gina and here I make videos all about naturally curly hair. I love doing simplified step-by-step tutorials, helping you problem solve and diving into the science of hair. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for coming back to my channel. So let's first cover what is brush styling. Basically, brush styling is a styling technique where you use a hairbrush to enhance your naturally curly hair or your waves. This is typically used when you have clean hair and you're applying your styling products while your hair is wet. This is not dry brushing or anything like that. And it's also just not regular hair brushing. This is actually using the brush and the bristles or the handle to actually style your hair. So enhance its appearance. So kind of think of it like using a curling wand, but for naturally curly hair. And you know how you can take scissors and run it down a ribbon with some tension and how it makes the ribbon curl? Well, that's essentially what a brush does. It's applying tension on the hair to make it really spiral or just to enhance your natural curl pattern. There's a couple different ways that you can brush style, but the most common ones is just regular brush styling with tension. And then there's also brush coiling, which is where you use the handle of the brush to really create those ringlets. So now let's cover some of the pros and cons of brush styling so that way you can determine if it's right for you or not. And then we'll get into how you can safely brush style and also who might want to avoid brush styling. So first off, let's talk about some of the pros of brush styling. The most prominent one that you probably are feeling too is brush styling is it enhances your curl pattern. So it really creates that even texture throughout your curls. So if you have like say type 3 or 3B curls, you'll really see those curl ringlets when you were brush styling because of that tension. It also can create a more consistent curl pattern. So if you have some pieces that like to just hang a little bit straighter, or if you have some that are straighter at the ends, brush curling or brush styling can really enhance those curls, kind of like a curling wand where it creates a more consistent curl pattern. It can also really enhance your root lift, so you can get actually more definition at the root because you were creating that tension right at the root. And then it can also create a lot of root lift and volume because you can create those bends right at the root, especially if you were lifting the hair up and away from the scalp. So you can get a lot more root volume compared to just raking in your products in a downward motion. One of the other biggest advantages is it really helps to smooth frizz. Anytime that I don't brush style my hair, I have so much more frizz and my hair is much more stringy. And that is because brush styling does create clumps. So it creates those curl families or those curl clumps where the hair wraps around itself versus going in all different directions to where the hairs are just poking through all over. It kind of groups that frizz into a curl clump, so you get more consistent curl clumps all throughout versus the hair is kind of just going rogue like they like to do with curly hair. So it's a more defined, controlled look when you brush style. It also can help the curls last longer. Anytime that your hair is more clumped and defined, it's going to last a lot longer and those ringlets are going to stay intact longer because they have that structure there. Whereas if you just like rake in your products, it might be a little bit more separated. You might get more volume without brush styling, but it might not last as long because you might actually see the frizz more when it's not clumped into a curl clump. And it can also prevent stringiness. Like I mentioned, anytime that I don't brush style, I really struggle with very stringy areas, especially in this section of my hair. I don't know if it's because I have like some tapering in my haircut, and also because I have experienced hair loss in the past, and that tends to happen around the temple area. So my ends are a lot stringier in this section, so brush styling helps to create some curl clumps with the hair that I do have, even if it's thin, which can prevent it from looking very stringy and sparse. So that is one advantage. The curls last longer and they also are less stringy, they're more clumped. Another advantage is it can actually be faster compared to other curl defining techniques such as finger coiling or finger rolling. You can actually brush style an entire section all at once, so that way you can style your hair a lot faster. Now obviously it does take more time than just raking and scrunching and going, but it's a lot faster compared to something like finger coiling where you have to do every single curl. You can brush style an entire section all at once. So now let's cover the cons of brush styling or the negative effects of brush styling, because it's the main part of this video with really what are the concerns with it that you guys need to know to determine if it is right for you or not. So the biggest concern in my opinion is the cuticle damage that it can cause to your hair. There is such thing called mechanical damage, and that is damage that's done to the hair's cuticle layer from regular things like brushing or from detangling. There are lots of different ways that your hair can become damaged, like from the sun, from heat, from bleach, but mechanical damage is just regular wear and tear that can be done on your hair just from everyday practices. So unfortunately, brushing can chip away the hair's cuticle. The hair's cuticle is the outermost layer of the hair strand. Kind of think of it like scales or shingles. That's actually what it looks like. I'll put up a picture here if you want to see what a damaged cuticle looks like, but brushing or applying tension to the hair can actually chip away some of those cuticles, and you need that cuticle layer to protect your hair, keep it strong, prevent it from breaking off, prevent split ends, and also prevent moisture and protein from escaping from your hair. You want that cuticle to stay intact. A healthy cuticle doesn't have a ton of chips in it, and it can effectively let moisture in and hold on to moisture, and it doesn't just deteriorate. So it is important to keep your cuticle healthy, and I would say that's probably the biggest downside of brush styling, is you really have that friction happening on the hair from the tension from the brush. So that can lead to things like breakage, which is my next downside to brush styling, especially if you're someone with very fine hair, or if you do have damage, you can get breakage from brush styling. And then some people are just more prone to breakage, especially if you have fine curly hair where the individual strands of hair are very small and it can just not withstand that type of tension. Another downside is whenever you're creating very thick curl clumps, it can reduce your volume, and it can also take a long time to dry. So if you have lower density hair like mine, if you over clump your hair, it might not look like you have as much hair on your head because the hair is very grouped together versus separated and voluminous. And this can also lead to a longer dry time, no matter what your density is, especially if you have high density hair and you're really clumping it. Those curl clumps can really hold on to a lot of moisture, especially if you're using products with a lot of oils and butters. It's going to take forever for your hair to dry when it's very clumped. And another obvious downside is it's very time consuming. Some people like to just rake in their products, scrunch and go, and be out the door in a few minutes from styling their hair. But when you're brush styling, it's more of a fine-tuned styling technique. But when you are putting in more time into your styling, your hair can last a lot longer for some hair types that do struggle with frizz and stringiness, but it does take extra time, obviously, to define each section. It also requires coordination. I feel like this is not something that most people talk about, but some people literally just cannot get their wrist to move in the right way. It does take a lot of practice to get the hang of it because it's not just the same as just brushing your hair downwards. I mean, you can do that, but you're not gonna get like the curl enhancing effects. There's a special technique to brush styling that involves like a turn of the wrist. That's why some people struggle with using a curling iron, especially if you don't have the same range of motion as an average person. Something like brush styling could be difficult for you, especially if you can't get your hands over your head to do it. So it does require some coordination. The last one I wanted to mention is still kind of unknown because unfortunately curly hair is not very well studied, but some say that it can alter your curl pattern. And this involves over manipulation, which basically means when you are forcing your hair into a different direction or a different curl clump or a different curl family, then it naturally wants to go. That's over manipulating it, which can then cause damage, or it could even change the structure of your hair. Now, this again is not studied. Some people might say that this has occurred to them if they did a lot of brush coiling specifically, which is where you're wrapping the hair around the handle. And if you're not picking up the right size of curl clump, then you could be trying to force curl clumps that don't belong together into their clump, and it's not the right size. So this is obviously not proven. Like I said, I couldn't find research on it because unfortunately curly hair is not studied enough, so there's not studies out there, at least that I could find, that actually show that you can change your curl pattern. And if your hair can be trained, like curl training is debatable. Like some people say that it's actually not really a thing. Some people say that they swear by curl training. But technically, when you wet your hair, the bonds in it actually do reset. So that's why your hair gets straighter when it's wet, and then when it dries, it shrinks up because they reset. So technically, once you wash your hair, that curl definition goes away, and then it resets when it dries. So that could tell you that it's not actually a thing. You can't change your curl pattern, but you can't deny when people say, you know, that they feel like their curl pattern changed from over manipulation. I can definitely tell you that, in my opinion, certain areas of my hair that I started finger coiling have definitely become a lot curlier. Specifically this area of my hair, I don't know if you all have noticed, but I have a lot more ringlets right here, and not because my hair became healthier. I actually feel like my hair is quite damaged in this area, but I actually have been finger coiling this area from styling more. And even when I don't finger coil now or brush style, my hair still takes that pattern. It still does turn in that direction. I don't know if it's just gotten used to that or what, but I have found that to be true. Again, there's not actual studies that show that you can change your curl pattern by manipulating it, not permanently, but I feel like your hair pattern can change when you are constantly wearing it in a certain way. So again, this is just my experience, but I don't know if any of you have ever worn your hair up tight every single day. Those people do experience their hair being more stretched out because it's constantly being pulled and stretched out. Or maybe you wear your hair behind your ear all the time so this piece doesn't curl. I bet if you start finger coiling every time you style, it might start to curl up more. Now obviously the healthier your hair gets, the more likely it is to take a tighter curl pattern or be in its natural curl pattern if it gets healthier. And if it becomes more damaged, it can loosen up with damage and more cuticle damage. So there is a health thing that comes into play here depending on how damaged or how healthy your hair is. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think you can actually train your curls, and do you think brush styling can alter your curl pattern if you were forcing it or over manipulating it into a certain curl pattern all the time? Let me know what you guys think, because it's definitely up for debate. So how do you determine what is best for you, whether if you brush style or you don't brush style? You have to weigh the pros and cons that I already mentioned, and I kind of feel like you have to pick your damage. Like you're always gonna have some sort of damage to your hair unless if you take perfect care of it, and if that's something you want to do, then more power to you. But I feel like some people might want the benefits more than they care about some cuticle damage, especially if you think of it kind of like diffusing. Diffusing is still using heat on your hair. Some of us like to, scrunch diffuse. That's a form of curl manipulation. That's probably causing some heat damage, but I'm okay with a little bit of heat damage if I can get the desired look that I have. Same with people who highlight their hair. They know that it's damaging their hair's cuticle. They know that it's damaging their hair's, structure and can really weaken the hair, but they want the look of highlights. So it's the same thing. If it's something that you want to do to enhance your curl pattern, just know the effects of it, like I mentioned, and you can decide if that's worth it to you. The reason that I've been mentioning recently how I would like to brush style less is because I want to try and get my hair as healthy as possible, because my hair still kind of acts like high porosity hair, even though I've completely grown out my bleach damage. I don't really use a ton of heat. I use safe diffusing practices, yet it still seems high porosity, and there could be other things that are influencing that. There's tons of things that can damage your hair, but I don't know, I was just thinking, I guess maybe if I brush style less and apply less tension, then maybe I won't have so much breakage and all that. But it's been really hard to completely give up because I do really like the effects, and every time I don't brush style, it is so stringy and frizzy and it just doesn't last. And for me, I don't want to be spending time every day refreshing, trying to get it to not be stringy and frizzy. So for me, it's a trade-off, and I've just been kind of brush styling. So there are some ways though that you can still brush style without as much damage, and we will get into that in just a second. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Also, if you are finding this helpful, make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, because I make videos like this every single week. So I just wanted to cover real quick who should use brush styling with extreme caution or maybe even avoid it. So if you're someone that has extremely damaged hair, like you have bleached it to no end, it has so much heat damage, it's like breaking off, definitely don't add a brush to your hair unless if you don't want to have any hair on your head, because you could end up with a ton of breakage. So extremely damaged hair should probably not brush style or use extreme caution. And I want to just make sure that I warn these types of people so that way they don't end up with a bunch of breakage. Also, people who have super fine hair probably should avoid it, just because super fine hair doesn't have that structure in place to be able to withstand tension. So you could experience a lot of breakage. Also, some people are just more prone to breakage. I think a lot of it is also tied to nutrition too, which I can get into in another video, but some people just have drier hair, hair that breaks easily. Even though they take care of their hair, they just suffer with breakage. I feel like that's me, and maybe it's tied to nutrition, but I just think that if you're experiencing a ton of breakage already, why add to it with a brush? But just keep that in mind. And then there's also people who struggle with hair loss. You can definitely have more shedding when it comes to brush styling. You'll see some hairs in the brush, and that's because you're putting tension on the hair follicle. And if you're experiencing a lot of hair loss, you know that any little bit of tension or tugging on the hair strand can make it just fall right out. So I would avoid it if you have a ton of hair loss. So now let's get into the tutorial part of this video, which is how you can brush style safely. So is there a happy medium? Can you actually brush style without causing a ton of damage? Let's dive in. So the first thing you want to do is ensure that your hair is free of tangles. So when I get out of the shower and my hair is wet still, I've already rinsed out my conditioner, I like to apply a leave-in conditioner or a curl cream. I usually use either one, but today I'm going with a leave-in because it's more lightweight and I want to make sure I get more hold out of my gel. I'm also going in with a heat protectant spray. This is another way to prevent breakage and also prevent heat damage, and it can also help prevent mechanical damage as well. Actually, the leave-in conditioner that I'm using is also great for breakage as well. It helps to strengthen the hair, and it also provides more manageability and slip, which is something that's going to help prevent your brush from snagging. So I definitely recommend these for preventing breakage. And I just comb it through to make sure it's evenly distributed and also to make sure that there's no tangles in my hair, because you can't brush style hair that is tangly. You also want to make sure that your hair is evenly wet. You need enough water in your hair in order to brush style, or else you're not going to get any clumps or curl definition from brush styling if it's too dry. Also, I like to apply my leave-in or my curl cream first, and then I also like to apply my gel and then brush style. Some people like to just do cream or leave-in, brush style, and then apply gel. It's really up to you, but I would make sure that you're not using a gel that doesn't have enough slip, or a gel that's too thick, like those super thick clear gels that are kind of sticky. That's not something you want to brush style in your hair. So I would apply that after brush styling. Same with mousse. Mousse doesn't really have enough slip, I don't think, for brush styling after it. I also really like to make sure that I'm using gels that have a lot of slip. I went with this Custard today because it does have a lot of slip. This is also great if you live in any dry climates. It's kind of dry right now, so I thought it would be a good one to go with. It's a medium buildable hold, but it has a lot of slip too, which is awesome. So now let's talk about the brushes to avoid breakage and the ones that I like to brush style with. So I recommend going with a brush that has plastic bristles because they're more flexible and bendy, and also a brush that has flexible bristles. So you want the bristles to be able to bend. So you actually want to touch it and feel it and see if the bristles can bend, because then it means it's going to flex with your hair and not just rip out your hair. I would avoid a boar bristle brush. A boar bristle brush is one that provides a ton of tension, and it also has very stiff bristles. It has like those natural boar material brushes. I'll put up a photo here on the screen, but this is the type that I think really is going to cause too much breakage. I know I've definitely used some in the past and I regret using that so much on my hair because it is too much tension. They do create very nice ribbon curls, but I feel like that brush texture can just be a little bit harsh on the hair. But if you have super healthy hair and you don't mind and you want to get those very thick ribbon-like curls, that is the brush that will create it, but I would just avoid it if you want to prevent breakage. I will say there is one alternative to a boar bristle brush, and that's this one from Briogeo. This is their vegan boar bristle brush. These bristles are still plastic, or they're like a synthetic material. They're more flexible and they don't feel as hard and stiff, and like they don't hurt my hand when I'm touching them, you know? So I feel like if you do want to create a lot of tension, this is more of a brush to go with, but I really haven't been using this one recently. You might have noticed because I'm really trying to prevent a lot of, you know, breakage and cuticle chipping. So that's why I haven't been using this, but I do love the effects from this. I just think it is a little too much tension because I'm trying to get my hair very healthy. So I'll show you my preferred one in just a minute, but this is a brush that provides the least amount of tension. So this is one way that you can still get some of the effects of brush styling, but not apply too much tension. This is a wet brush. This one is super flexible and it doesn't have as many bristles. The more bristles you have and the more like rows of bristles, the closer they are together, the more tension it's going to apply on your hair. And the farther spaced apart, almost like a comb, is going to apply the least amount of tension. More tension is more breakage, so keep that in mind. So I've actually been using this some, especially on the lower layer where I want my hair to be more separated. I don't want to create too much clumping underneath because that makes my like lower section of my hair look too clumped and too thin. So this actually works perfectly fine. You can still apply some tension by kind of pressing your hand against it and pulling it down. That's going to apply some tension and the hair is going to wrap around this edge. That's actually what creates the curl, is when it wraps around that edge. but it's not as damaging because see how flexible these bristles are. So this is one option. It's a great alternative when you still want some of the effects of brush styling, but you don't want too much tension. There's also different techniques or ways of turning your wrists that you can use too to apply less tension. So the more tension that you put on your hair with your wrist and using your hand, obviously the more breakage. Whereas there's also ways to just kind of gently pull the brush through the hair that's not quite applying as much tension, but it's still kind of clumping the hair. You can even try to do this with like a wide tooth comb. If you still want to get like a clumping effect, but you don't want to apply a lot of tension, you could just kind of brush with less tension. Then my Tangle Teaser brush. So this has been my favorite recently because it's like the best of both worlds. I can get some tension with this depending on how I use it, but it's still very flexible, and I can also create clumps with it, but not too many clumps, if that makes sense. I don't know, I just feel like this design is really nice. It doesn't cause as much breakage for me. I don't have as much hair in the brush whenever I use this one. The bristles are flexible and it's multi-purpose. Like I can use this to distribute product, which you've seen me do in many videos, to style or even to detangle, but I don't usually detangle with a brush. I use my hands for that. But yeah, it's multi-purpose, which is nice. So when I brush style with this, I usually am using it on the top section, and I also am doing more like fine-tuned styling, especially on areas where I tend to get a lot of frizz, maybe in some of my gray patches or where I have a lot of shorter hairs from new growth. That's really the places where I like to do some more like coiling just to help tuck those frizzy pieces into a curl clump. So I just wanted to show you kind of what that looks like by using the handle more. This is more like curl manipulation, so you would want to skip using these techniques if you're wanting to minimize the manipulation, but it does help to make these areas not frizz out as easily. So that's why I've been doing that just on the top section, but I don't need to do all that fine-tuned styling on the lower section that you don't really see anyways. So another way to ensure that you're not getting a lot of damage from brush styling is to make sure that you are incorporating bond repair treatments or protein ingredients regularly, because that's going to keep your hair strong. I actually use the Ouidad Bond shampoo and conditioner today. That's a great way to just incorporate some strengthening ingredients without having to do a ton of work because it's in your shampoo and conditioner. Another way to do that is use something like Olaplex or Curlsmith Bond Curl about once a month or so, or every other week. And that's another way to just strengthen your hair and maintain its health. So that's personally what I like to do. Like I said, I have chosen to still brush style some using safer practices, not overdoing it, but I know I'm getting some damage from that tension, so I'm just incorporating some protein ingredients to maintain strength and some bond building treatments. This is also going to help maintain your hair's elasticity. Your elasticity is basically how much your hair can stretch without breaking. You want your hair to have some stretch, but not too much, but you also don't want it to snap immediately. So if your hair is like snapping off, that's when you know that you don't have enough elasticity and you need to work in more like protein and moisture to help balance out that elasticity. So lastly, let's cover some brush styling alternatives. So there are some things you can do if you don't want to brush style, or you want to just barely brush style but still get some of the benefits but not do like full-on brush coiling. So the first one I kind of already talked about, and that's using a brush like this to just give a little bit of the effect but not overly clump the hair and not apply too much tension. So a wet brush is a great way to do that. You could even try a wide tooth comb if you wanted to. Another option is finger coiling. So finger coiling is basically where you take a little section of hair and twirl it around your finger while it has product and while your hair is wet, and you also want your hands to have product and be wet too, so you have that slip. So this is something that I typically do around my face framing pieces where I have baby hairs, and also in areas where the curls tend to really change directions, which happens for me on the face framing pieces. A lot of these front pieces for me, they will really spring up if I encourage them to go in the right direction. But if I just like brush them straight, they kind of just hang and they don't know which way they want to go. But when I really encourage them to go in the right direction with finger coiling, they really spiral up. So that's why I do that in this section. They just need a little bit of encouraging to go in their natural direction. I'm not forcing it in a different direction. I'm not forcing the curl clump amount to change or the curl shape to change. I'm just kind of encouraging it to take its natural curl pattern, basically. So you could do this all over your head. I've actually tried that before in a video. I finger coiled my entire head, and that definitely takes a while and is time consuming, but people sometimes love it because they get very long lasting curls. You can also try the rake and shake method, which is an old styling technique that was used in salons. It's basically where you just kind of apply tension, or like you use your fingers to clump the curls and kind of pull down on the strand, and then you shake it which is going to help the curls start to bounce up. Now this is obviously kind of time consuming because you would have to do that to every section of hair, and I personally think it would be a little hard to do it on yourself too. It's a lot easier for like a stylist to be doing it on you, but it is another method that clumps the hair similarly to brush styling, but it's still applying tension on the hair, so I could see it still leading to some breakage. And then there's also the praying hands technique, which is really just a method of clumping the hair. Sometimes I will do that in areas like the front section that I mentioned that tend to get very stringy. Sometimes they're even stringy after brush styling, so I will just kind of smush them between my palms, which basically just kind of smushes the hairs together and helps it clump, but that's not really going to help with like definition. It's more so just for clumping. So those are some of the different styling techniques that can enhance your curl pattern, but again, anytime you are over manipulating your hair, you can expect some damage to the hair. But hopefully this helped you kind of weigh some of the benefits and see if it's worth it to you or if it's not worth it. Definitely let me know in the comments if you feel like it's worth it for the benefits and you don't mind sacrificing a little bit of damage to help improve your lifestyle or help, you know, improve your confidence with your curls, or is it not worth it to you and you stay away from brushes? Let me know. I am going to link you to all the products too that I mentioned down below if you're interested in checking any of them out. These are my results, by the way, from using those products. A great summer combination. It was my first time trying out this combination and I really like my results. Very soft, kind of fluffy, and still have great definition. Hopefully they hold up for a while. I will definitely keep you guys posted over on Instagram. If you like this video, check out the one that I will have linked right here on the screen, which is all about how to brush style faster. I share a technique in there to where you can brush style an entire section at once, and I feel like that would cause less breakage as well. And it's an alternative to doing like brush coiling, and you can do it a lot faster. So I'll have that video linked right here on the screen, and I will talk to you over there. Bye everyone.